the expertise and the credibility of the leader matters so much um, to the person that they're leading. But I'm finding in this next generation who that human is matters so much for them. If I as a leader don't understand more about the person working for me's life, not just their career, I'm doing a major disservice to them. I feel like that's probably how it's always been, but it seems to be really important to millennials and I guess is it Gen Z is the next one. So, we have an assortment of people that work for us and with us, and there seems to be a little bit of where Gen X and the baby boomers were so in tune with the rules and the structure and the credibility. The next generation tends to take lesser jobs. They want to know you care. They want to know you're making an impact. Like that's been our experience, but I'm interested in what research shows.
Fascinating. That is fascinating. I mean, to be honest, in terms of the generations, I can't differentiate in my data, particularly the difference in the generations. Now, I know anecdotally, naturally, I live in the world, I work in the world. I know that things have changed. Millennials, Gen Z. I know that law firms pull their hair out because they were, the new generation of lawyers won't do what etc. I mean, we all
Right.
know that, and we know that there's been a big change, and COVID exacerbated that, I'm sure as well. I mean, I suppose, yes, they may want you to think about them more. I know that well-being has become a much bigger thing, the concept of well-being and everything. And, for us, well, for me, I'm older than you, but it was slightly different. Funnily enough, I still think that ultimately, even though they may not be aware of this, and this is an interesting thing about the generations, is that I don't know what you were like when you were kind of 18, 19, but I was a cocky wench. I mean, you think you know it all. No, I want revolution and we're going to change the world. It's all going to happen like this, blah, blah, blah. And you're an arrogant son of a bee. And, and then you grow up and you realize, God, I knew nothing at that age. And I think one of the things about the younger generation at the moment, and there was interesting research about this actually, that the young generation, a lot of them want to stay at home rather than come into the office. But what they don't realize is that that's actually really harming their career. And there is evidence to show that it is really harming their career. Now, they think they know what's best for them, because we always do when we're young. We're young, arrogant, we're cocky, and we take risks. That's why the reason we're like that is because you want to take risks, and you have to take risks when you're young, because you're not going to take so many when you get older. So that in some ways, it's about meeting them halfway. We also have to say to them, you think you know what's best for you. We all think we know what's best for us when we're very young, but actually, by not coming into the office, by not learning from these other people around you, by not thinking about what the future may hold. Now, one of the things about Credible, the book and the research, is that I think experts, it's all about core business experts, but I think experts are going to have a kind of renaissance. They're going to come back with AI, with climate change. I mean, AI is particularly interesting, I think, because we're really going to, only experts are really going to understand the algorithms. And if we're all scared about how that's going to affect our lives, we're going to rely on them even more. And I think in some ways, I think young people also staying at home or not wanting to be present in the workplace, I worry about them, because I also think AI may be the replacement for them if they're not there and they're not learning all this stuff, because they will be easily reproducible, if that doesn't sound too simplistic. And that worries me. So I would say I get what they're saying, but I also think we as older people have to say, we have to turn to the evidence. If you don't just believe me as an older person who go, you're just an old bitch, what do you know? Let's look at some evidence and just think the evidence is showing that if you don't really commit to this, and it may put you in uncomfortable situations, and we may have uncomfortable conversations with you, because the only way you learn in life is through uncomfortable conversations and actually adapting your behavior. Now, the young people are more wise than I was in some ways at that age, but I
Yeah.
still think they're not as wise as they think they are. And I think there's evidence
Yeah.
to support that. And I don't mean to be unsupportive. I don't know what you think about that.
No, I think it's great. I look, first of all, I think there's a couple of correlations here. Number one, when we're young, I can completely relate. I don't want the 18-year-old Scott version to be introduced to this is the 45-year-old version, and it's a much more refined version. That version was a poor representative of who I would become. Number two, I think that at 18 to 25, maybe even longer now, because of the way that we're coddling children a lot more. Like you had to grow up quicker. We had to grow up quicker. You could go to India at 23. I did travel out of the country at 18. Like these were things that I was prepared for. I believe that we have a mentality when we're young of taking from the world. And when you're taking from the world, you feel like you're winning when you're staying at home. You feel like you're doing the least amount of work but getting the most credit, and you can just continue to take from the world. And then you realize that when you flip the switch to give to the world of yourself all that you have a change. You have a change in your career, you have a change in your perspective, you have a change in how people receive you, you have a change in your success. And it all comes from that flip of a switch that says, "Hey, I need to give what I'm great at." And the only other point I would make is you mentioned why being in the office is so powerful. This is so important. It's the power of the pop in. This is what I call, it's like parenting. I have two boys. They're now almost 15 and 18. And I can tell you that if I try to correct them when they were super young later in the day after something happened, it doesn't help. So if we're trying to correct course, the greatest way to correct course is to do it in the moment. So when someone answers the phone and they handle a client the wrong way, if I can come in and say, "Amanda, listen, I don't want you to just ask if you can help that person. I want you to ask how you can help that person." See, the change of one word can change the way that individual is receiving you. So if you're coming up closed, they don't want to answer you. But if you come open to anything they need, they're more apt to build a relationship with you. And that can only happen with a pop in. But if you're at home and you're just going through the motions, everything it's old and antiquated and will eventually lead to your replacement.
Absolutely.
So
And but
you're
the other
right.
side of that, which is so interesting, and it's happened actually in our workplace recently, I won't mention any names, but the other side of that is that if you're in the office and you're hearing these things happening all the time, you're hearing these kind of someone's giving you a little bit of advice or whatever, or chipping in like that. It's also building up you hearing these what we call difficult conversations, and they may not be that difficult actually, but they are really difficult when you're in this little safe kind of home area where there's only you and your pussycat, no one is challenging you at all. Then when someone actually says, can you change it like this? Suddenly you have a kind of psycho crisis and then your well-being collapse, and then you're on leave from blah, blah, blah. And that we see. I mean, I don't mean to be cruel, but
No, no, it's
some young
true. It's
people
true.
are incredibly delicate about these things. And this is stuff that, I'm not saying we want to get the beatings that we might have had years ago, but, we've gone a long way. I mean, as a woman, we're coming up to, International Women's Day, as a feminist, we've come a long way. We've come a long way around sexuality. We've come a long way around identity, all those kinds of things. But we just don't want to lose the. We want to build up a strong outer casing, and we have to take on life and to really, as you say, max life, and that requires hearing little adjustments all the way along. If we just don't want to hear those and just spend time with our cat or our dog at home in the safety of nothing, I mean, we're just going to end up with this kind of porous skin that's never going to protect us against anything. And the world is not going to get easier. It's going to get harder.
Yeah, and I think this leads us right to your research, and that is if I flip that and I take it from the other direction, which is as a leader, my job has to include being present. My job has to include understanding those little conversations, being the one to have them occasionally, being the one to actually listen and learn and be available for the 5 minute pop in, the open door policy. One of the things that really matters is it goes both ways. I
Yeah.
can't effectively lead, and I do this all the time. I went in, you get to a point where people are booking your schedule and you have no pockets, no gaps. And when I'm in the lunchroom, the other day I was sitting in the lunchroom and I had we built our office to where there's this open area, and there were 5 or 6 people all sitting and having lunch, and I sat in there for probably about 30 minutes longer than I was allotted to in the schedule, and there was something I pushed off because of it. And when I came back, my assistant said, "Hey, you really need to come back in." I said, "No, my number one job. I'm not in the office enough. When I'm here, I have to have a pulse of what's going on. I have to communicate with everybody. I have to listen. And if I don't do that, I lose my effectiveness as a leader." And she smiled and she was like, "Okay, all right, fair. I'll move it then." So, we have
Absolutely.
these, but she's doing her job and I'm
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
mine, and I
yeah, yeah,
appreciate it. But I also feel like it goes both ways. And I imagine research probably shows that
yeah. And
that's an
particularly,
efficient way.
I mean, the thing about you is you are an expert leader, which is probably why I'm on your, honored to be on your podcast. And
Thank
that
you.
can have. What's interesting about experts as well is that they, and this is why we train them actually in leadership management, because you sound like you've learned this or you're a natural. I don't know, but sometimes experts who start their own business up or who have just focused in on one area and really know it can become a bit arrogant. They can have a bit of hubris. They think, I'm good at this, so I'm probably bloody good at everything. And they're not good at listening necessarily, which is why when we train, I run a course for doctors, and the first thing we do is slam that mirror in their face, and it's all about behaviors and stuff. So, yes, as you say, absolutely, it's a two-way thing. You have to, and that means the thing that I think you have got, which sounds really admirable for an expert, is you have the humility to know that you need to listen to them, you need to be there and hear them, because that's often something that's lacking in experts, because they have kind of developed this expertise. Now, if you run a business and you're sensible and you know that the generations are different, it seems to me like you've adapted extraordinarily well to doing that, to actually recognizing that you have to be there for them and that they are slightly different to maybe a previous generation that you work with. But that's amazing. And that is really commendable. And yes, the research absolutely supports that.